Hello and welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave. Dave's not here. And Mackie, I am here on WZZR broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, where it's more than just radio. So jump in the chat room if you can. I'm there. There's a whole bunch of other people. Hey there. Great to see you on the chat room. Hello to all new listeners, all old listeners. And if you make it to the chat, I'd be more than happy to react to all of your comments. Not with an emoji, but in person. This is show number 405, 5 and 400, and we are talking about the hypothesis, the very reason this show exists, the very reason we've been talking for 8 years. And if you're into numbers, we are serving out our 8th year, and come March, April timeframe, we will be into our 9th year. On the air here with Freedom Slips on Revolution Radio. Pretty awesome. It's on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen anywhere. Or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. Hello, Lioness, old listener. Welcome aboard. SJ is there. Dune up. Jabber, I can see you in the chat. SJ, of course. Omega Logos. Lioness, I think I said. Maybe I did not. Oh, yes, I did. Of course I did. Old listener. If you missed Solaris' show, shame on you, shame on me. Actually, I didn't miss it. I caught the tail end of it. It was a roundtable with a bunch of interesting, I guess most of them are also radio show hosts that were on the roundtable. Some very interesting topics discussed there. Some personal stuff came out as well. That's how it goes. Stream of consciousness when you get a round table. It just goes. It just, you roll with it, and you'll see where the conversation takes you. It's really cool. I love it. Look, if you did miss her, then you can go to the archives. I understand the archives is being fixed, which is great, and it only costs $5 a month to access those archives on freedomslips.com, and you can check out her shows, our shows, and all the hosts' shows for $5. Pretty good. In Australia, it's the price of coffee. So you don't get much for $5 anymore. Before we get cracking here, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. It's an Australian thing. If you don't understand what this means, I will explain in a second. And where I live, it is the Darug people, or Darug. And for my esteemed co-host, up in his neck of the woods near Narara, it's the Dark and Young people. And we would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Sometimes substituted with emerging. Now, why do we do this? What does it mean? Now, might be hard to swallow for some, but history didn't begin with the white man. It really didn't. So all these terra nullia and terra incognita and all these places in the world that were undiscovered by the white man existed. They had people there already for a long time. In fact, some civilizations had reached such lofty heights that any European traveling there would have been flabbergasted and completely baffled by the achievements had they only coexisted in time. The Aztec, the Mayan empires were massive, right? The First Nations people of North America, they had massive nation-type constructs. You can't call them nation states in the European sense, but they certainly were well-organized large nations of people working together, having a civilization, And then, along comes the white man. It's always the man with infested and infected, in fact, blankets, and we committed genocide on a monumental scale on all of the native people of the world. Maybe that's what we do in Europe. Maybe that's our thing. Maybe genocide is I'm not saying it's only Europeans that do it, obviously, but we do it so well. We do it so well. It is shameful. Africa, my God, it's bloodbath. Yeah, and even country. France, yeah, okay, we know Italy, okay, the English, yeah, we know all the culprits. But if you know what the Belgians did in the Congo. My God, it's a whole different level of insane. The Middle East, the problems in the Middle East, yes, it goes back a long time, but the more recent issues you can trace back to the end of World War II, or the immediate vicinity of World War One, I should say. World War One, the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the decision by the Allied forces, the French and the British specifically, to divide up the Middle East a certain way. Not bright, not smart. Jews have been in the Middle East all along, in Palestine, or formerly Palestine, what's now Israel. In fact, there's a huge bunch of European Jews, excuse me, that went to Palestine in the 1880s in the first yeshuva, and they built the first kibbutzim. It was a socialist movement. It wasn't a religious movement. They tried to get away from anti-Semitic Europe. The Dreyfus Affair, read up on it. It's interesting. It's an interesting piece of history. It only became what it is today after World War II. And when the British just couldn't take it anymore, they left the Palestine Protectorate and said, yeah, whatever. We had enough. See ya. And the state of Israel was declared. Very controversial stuff, all of that. But, that's me ranting about the first people of the world, or the first peoples, that were then displaced in a swift manner by the European colonists, settlers, traders, religious icons. We brought religion as well. Islam made it all the way to Indonesia. Yeah, so that's pretty amazing as well. And without the trappings of colony, it seems it's fascinating stuff. It really is. One does well to read up on these matters, just so we can know our history. We can know where we are, who we are, and how we are, and how it all happened in the first place. I mean, how did we get here? I mean, really? We have now we're impeaching a president of the United States. Only the third time it ever happened in the history of the United States. Not a proud thing to be happening. But what you're gonna do? It's what it is. You can disagree with him. You can agree with him. Doesn't matter. Should it have come to this impeachment? Well, look. If the articles of impeachment are correct, if he did what he did, and it's a grievous enough offense, then yes, of course. But they were witch hunting him from the day he took office. He's not a Hollywood. He's not a Washington insider. I was going to say Hollywood insider. He's probably more of a Hollywood insider than anyone else. No, he's not a Washington insider, and of course the establishment didn't like that, right? He's not a politician. He's not an apparatchik, we used to call them in Europe after World War II, the apparatchik. It didn't matter who you were, what you believed in. You just always set your flag in the way the wind blew. An apparatchik. So convinced and fervent Nazis in the Third Reich became fervent and zealous communists once the Russians took over parts of Poland, East Germany, of course, some of the other Eastern Bloc countries, and similar with Western Germany. It died in the wool. Nazis became captains of industry and capitalists, and arguably, the Nazi apparatus, the entire machinery that the Nazis built, and then which was almost taken over wholesale by both the Soviets and the Allies, the US and their friends after World War II, shaped those two countries in their image. And I think they shaped America more than they shaped Russia. But they were both shaped in the image of the Nazis. They took on in Operation Paperclip, and there's actually no name for it on the Russian side. They just took the scientists and the intelligence officers and incorporated them into their own state machine. So all of the things we see today, like the mind control stuff, the CIA things, the NSA things, all the stuff, all the secrecy, the tremendous. Hidden government and the secrecy that surrounds it all. That's all straight out of the Nazi playbook. And the people that built the CIA were largely Nazis. So before the CIA was formed, it was called the OSS, Operation for Special Services. I think it was Operation for Special Services. It was definitely the OSS. And then it was turned into the Central Intelligence Agency, amalgamating a few agencies into the CIA. And then the FBI came along, and then, of course, after 9/11, there was the Office for Homeland Security, Patriot Act 1 and 2. Got to understand your history, everybody. Got to understand it. Otherwise, you're just left there in the ocean, paddling, thinking, what happened? I went to bed, and here I am paddling in the ocean. I do apologize for my voice. I seem to have caught a little bug. Nothing serious. Just gives me a bit of a croaky throat. I will take a sip once in a while from my trusty tea here. I'm also taking Echinacea propolis. It's like a mouth spray. It's from kiwi herbs. I highly recommend it, as well as the highest potency Manuka honey. I can recommend. It's good stuff. If you can get your hands on it, take it. It beats pharmaceuticals hands down. I've tried it now for years. It really does work. The other teas and herbs and such. So I just say that stuff works. Where do you think Big Pharma gets all the ideas from? Yes, Mother Nature. That's who. Now, my esteemed co-host, Dave, is running late. I have high hopes that he will join us, well, if not soon, maybe at the second part of the show. But we are talking about the hypothesis, right? That's really what we're talking about. And that's just going to be done in the second part of the show. We'll give you some more general comments. Up to then, we might start early if I run out of things to say. Happy for any feedback from the chat room as well. Throw me questions, whatever you like to do. It's all goodness, because this is about information, interaction, right? We're living in the age of interaction. The internet, for all its shortcomings and drawbacks, has given us an enormous platform to interact. Not to the detriment of interpersonal relationships, as I've seen. So you still have to face up to your fellow human beings. I suggest it's a good thing to do that. Okay, I would definitely go ahead and spend time with people. Watch this. I read the book first. Ready Player One. A really great book. If you have only seen the movie, please go ahead and then read the book. And in the movie, and I think it was in the book as well, but in the movie the quote was, "I like reality." This is from the inventor of this amazing virtual world, right? That's where most of the movie takes place in, and the visuals in the movie are really, really good. So if you like to go to the cinema or enjoy yourself a little movie night at home, I highly recommend Ready Player One. The point is, though, he said the creator of this amazing Oasis, it's called, said, "Well, I like reality best. It's the only place where you can get a decent meal." I second that. That's yes, it is the only place where you can get a decent meal. So don't get stuck in cyberspace. Don't get stuck in the virtual world. Even though, and this is where it gets interesting, later on in the show, we're going to talk about how real our reality is, right? Are we in a simulation? Is this... that's a good question, Linus. Okay, let's spend some time on that. So Linus asked me, Mackie, where do we go when we die? Very good question. I've got several ideas. So is this in fact a simulation we're in? We'll talk about that. Objective reality and quantum weirdness. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening at the moment. But Linus, that's an excellent question. This is contentious, right? Because I'm basing my opinion. And it's only my opinion, okay? I haven't got any hard proof for it. I'm basing my opinion on the fact, or the facts that were uncovered by researchers much more dedicated to these subjects than I. I'm a polymath when it comes to conspiracy theories. I'm across the whole spectrum of everything, because I believe everything has value and everything lends credence, even if it's only a red herring. But anyway, so the question was, where do we go when we die? There's a lot of work that was done, and we covered it off in some detail in other show cycles, but also when we talked about it here in the hypothesis of reincarnation. So reincarnation seems to be something that is happening to a large number of people, and in fact, quite maybe even everybody. Right? I'm not saying it happens to everybody, but indications are that it might. And only few of us remember it. Only a few of us remember these reincarnation experiences. In my mind, that's because the system, the cage, the machine, and I love the analogy of the machine, the gears of the machine that Nighthawk plays between shows in the little segment. It's broken. It's imperfect. It was built by the great adversary, our great enemy. The God of the Bible is in fact that great enemy, the great adversary, and the Gnostics believe that we covered it last week, and that's why they were burned at the stake. All the heretics, the Cathars, the Cathars were almost entirely rooted out. An entire peoples, I guess you could call them an ethnic group if you really wanted to, down in the Languedoc area of France. Entire cities razed, blood knee-deep in the streets, actually knee-deep in the streets. It's crazy stuff. Now, okay, so reincarnation. So we die, and then I've experienced many strange things in my life. My mother, my family in general, not just me, others as well, and you can't explain those things. You can't measure them. You can't test them. You can't scientifically give meaning to them because they don't fall within that measurable, quantifiable state of existence, right? It's very difficult to investigate these things. Having said that, investigations were conducted. Reincarnation seems to be a thing, but some of us remember it. That is really the interesting bit, right? And what they come back with is just phenomenal. You can't explain it, not really, right? It's not even with intense coaching could those children know all these things that they knew about their former life, people, things like that, their places, and so they remember. Most of us don't remember. I believe that's deliberate. So we have to start from scratch. So you die, your counter goes back to zero, and you have to start from scratch again. All the things you've learned, all the things you know, are not accessible in this present life. All right? I believe that in the in-between state, between this physical existence, reality here in the cage, I call it, and in the in-between state, you can access it. I think you've got access. I think you have got access to it in your dream state. Okay, I think you can train yourself to access more of it. Lucid dreaming, astral projection, all these wonderful things. I am a firm believer in the possibility of their existence. And then you're reassigned another body, you're born again into this world. For what purpose? Now, a lot of people like to think that we're born into this to learn, right? I don't know if that's true, okay? I personally don't think it's true at all. I think we're just reborn into the cycle to keep us here. And the funny thing is this, right? The more we like this world, the more we are engaged in its material aspects, like wealth and pleasure and all those things, even relationships. Those are things that tie us to this reality. If you can transcend your desires, like most of the yogis and Buddhas have tried to teach us, you can escape this and reach nirvana, which essentially is just not this place, okay? And you can go home. I believe home is elsewhere. I believe home is the complete manifestation of all our capabilities, which I also believe are probably close to limitless in our present understanding of that. We have not been told the truth. We are not given the opportunity to experience all of everything. The best way I can explain it, and it comes down to our biology as well. Our biology is very restrictive. Okay, we've got a face facing forward. In fact, we've got the entire front bit of us is facing forward. We've got a back, and we can't see there. We're not really good at understanding what's in our back, but we're really good at seeing what's in front. So that predetermines a certain mindset, of linearity, forward, back, and so forth. But we're not given the opportunity to fully explore the world. Look at the visual light, so the visible light that we have, the visual spectrum. It's a tiny little range of frequencies in the entire spectrum of frequencies, right? It's tiny, it really is small. But that's our world. We see. That's what we see. We also hear things, we can feel things, heat and cold. That's a little bit further into the spectrum, right? Either way. But that's it. It's a very tiny little thing that we participate in as far as the even this reality is concerned. Right? There's a lot more to be experienced outside of that. And we just don't. We're not built that way. Okay? I believe in your dream state. I believe in the state between lives. And if you escape, of course, the rebirth cycle, then you also have access to all of your faculties. Now, the dream, why do I say dream state? In a dream, everything makes sense. In a dream, you might have really strange experiences, you're flying upside down, you're a Coke bottle, whatever. But in the dream, you don't question it, right? You don't question it, you just go with it. Because, this is what life is like. I mean, if you're walking down the street right now, you're walking past one shop window and then the next shop window, and then, you see a dog on the side, and, there's this traffic light just up ahead. And that's just your life. You don't question because that's just what you expect to happen. Similarly, if once your mind is freed up into the upper echelons of experience and thought and mind, all of these other things that don't make any sense at all when you wake up make perfect sense to you in your sleep state because your mind is bigger or broader or deeper or whatever analogy you need to understand that it can do more. Okay. But I don't think we're here to learn. If we learn, great. Now, what we should learn is that we need to curb our desires and really lead an ascetic lifestyle to get out of this particular cage, right? That's what we've been taught. Even the Christians have been taught that. These seem like Hindu or Buddhist principles, yeah, sure. But the Christians know this as well, but they don't see it. I always quote from the Bible. I'm not a religious Christian man by any stretch of the imagination, but the Bible is full of nuggets of good information. Jesus said, "You live amongst people that have eyes but cannot see and ears but who cannot hear." That is very true. And then he said, or he might have said it before, "It is easier for a camel," I've said this many times before, "it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven." Right? What I believe Jesus was referring to was leaving this mortal coil, this machine, the black iron prison, whatever you're going to call it, the cave we're all stuck in right here. And for a rich man, it's impossible because a rich man is completely invested in this reality. Okay. All the material things that this rich man or woman has is tying that person to this reality. And in fact, it's funny. And again, I look at Charles Dickens here, A Christmas Carol. The most inspiration and insight comes from the most unlikely sources. Morley, or Marlowe. I think it was Marlowe. Could be Morley. The partner of Ebenezer Scrooge, who dies before him, 7 years before him, comes back to visit him. He's the first ghost he sees, to warn him that another 3 ghosts would come. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future. So, but I think it's Morley. Anyway, when he's there, he's got all these chains around him, around his neck and his body, and Scrooge asks him, "What are these chains?" And he says, "These are the chains I forged in my life. The greed I had, the material things, the attachments I had, they tie me to this earth." So none of these thoughts here that I'm sharing with you are new. They're not new. So lioness, that's what I think happens when you die. That was a very long-winded answer to a fairly simple question. I hope I didn't bore you guys too much there. And there are some really, really weird experiences. And my mom has got very close to second sight. And my grandmother had it. My grandmother was fantastic with the cards as well as astrology. She could do charts like you wouldn't believe. And my other side of the family as well, I didn't realize had that on my father's side. There was avid coffee ground readers and things like that. And the funny thing is this, right? There's some very specific things that are predicted and they happen. I stopped doing the tarot myself. I used to do tarot. I had the Rider-Waite. If you're into tarot, you know what I mean. I had the Rider-Waite deck. And I stopped when I predicted someone's death. And it was an obscure card pointing, and then but the thing is that you get feelings. You look at the cards and they give you context of the messages you receive. It's not like someone is talking to you. It's feelings you get, and it's context, right? So you're channeling these thoughts for the person that you're doing the reading for. You're not doing the reading, like you're not reading anything. The person is flowing through. They're channeling their questions through you, right? So that's why nobody should ever get paid for reading. I know I'm making a lot of enemies here, but we, the readers, don't actually do anything except, channel the energies that are coming from the subject, and then trying to interpret what we get. Some of us are good at it, others are not so good, but that's just, how it is. And so I saw someone's death. Not someone I knew, not someone, the person that I was doing for was close to, was a distant relative, but they called me 6 months later and said, "Oh my God, you're completely correct. And he died exactly how you thought he would." I said it would be related to some kind of throat thing, and it was actually throat cancer. So yeah, it's at that, and that was, oh my God, that was probably 15 years ago, and I haven't touched the card since. I've done some runes. I did some rune work. That's interesting as well. I tried the I Ching. That's very complex. I haven't got the time to study it in depth. Other than that, I use random methods of oracles, and now we've got the greatest oracle of all, Google. Tell us everything we want to know. Okay, before we even ask. I've got my phone here, so I'm sure Google is listening as well. But yeah, it's a really interesting kind of world we're living in. And all of these little things, all these little nuggets of information, you have to take and evaluate and then pop them together into your overall Weltanschauung, your view of the world. It's really, really, really important to not just follow someone or group of people. If you're born into a Catholic family, I'm Catholic. If you're born into a Muslim family, I guess you're Muslim. Well, you don't have to be. Does it make sense to you? I asked the question to someone. I mean, why do you believe what you believe? I don't do it anymore much because it just upsets people. But a lot of times people didn't have a good answer, right? I had one really good answer. I asked a friend, well, you've taken, and he actually took the path of theology. He's now published, believe it or not. And he's a pastor, a reverend. And I asked him, well, why do you believe what you believe? And he goes to me, it's the martyrs. The suffering of the martyrs sold me on it. And I said, okay, that's very, very interesting. What do you mean? Well, you have to have conviction to become a martyr for a cause. And there were so many of them, and they just went out anyway. They went out and tried to spread the word of God. I said, no, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. For me, that wouldn't work, but clearly he thought about it, and that's great. A lot of other people, though, they just have a faith, and it's comfortable because that's what they've known all their life. It's where the community is. It's where their family is. It's what they understand. It's what they know. It's another way to define yourself. It's another way to give yourself an identity, and it's okay, right? As long as that identity then doesn't actually beat up on other identities. if you get my drift, right? I'm very much of the opinion that anybody should believe whatever they want, right? Whatever they want, as long as they don't harm someone else. I don't really care, to be honest with you. There's the same thing with the same-sex marriage vote here in Australia. Who cares? There should never have been a vote. There should never have been a vote. It should have just been a thing. Get married if you want to. I don't care. Doesn't make any difference to me, right? It's your life. You do what you want. You want to get married to another man or another woman? If you're a man or a woman, knock yourself out. I really don't care. You got two consenting adults living their life together. There should never have been a vote. We should have just had it. It should have just been a thing. Giving it a vote, all you achieve is you divide a nation, you divide families against each other. Because some people obviously have very strong opinions. That's fair enough too. But I think it's just a cop-out. Okay? Cop-out. And sorry, I'm just seeing something here in the chat room. SJ, it's impossible to read too much. Impossible. Someone And I think it was George R. Martin of Game of Thrones fame. He said, a man who doesn't read, and I'm saying man, it could be a woman, lives one life. A person that reads lives many lives. And the lives you lead is only limited by the number of books that you can read. It gives you insight, and because there's still something to reading, as opposed to watching a movie or playing a game. There's this the act of reading, and the imagination that in your mind is building these worlds inside your heads, the visuals that you do. You do that. Yeah? It's not someone else doing it for you. I think it's a critical skill. Yeah, I think it's a critical aspect of anyone's life to read and internalize it. Find the books you like to read. Doesn't really matter, really, right? Just find something you like to read. Become an omnivore. Read everything. Magazines, books. It's good. It's good to read. You will learn stuff. I guarantee it. Right? But yeah, look, here in Australia, it's still hot. Tomorrow it's going to be 42 degrees, and it's going to be 40 for the rest of the week. Bushfires are still raging. We have lost houses, hundreds. We've lost people. It's not good. It isn't good. And we are sort of now we are at the beginning of the fire season, so December. We still have got January and February to go through. It's and it also it's now being debated quite openly in Australia whether or not we should have the fireworks. If you watch the fireworks from around the world, Australia is always up there with your Harbour Bridge. It's probably part of your broadcast wherever you are. There's now a debate going on whether we should have the fireworks. That's the thing, because it is such a catastrophic situation, and especially this is going to be in about three days. The conditions won't have changed, and Tuesday is going to be a specifically hot day. So lighting up, several tens of millions of dollars worth of fireworks might not be the best idea. Not just from a ethical or moral point of view, but from a pure safety factor, because there's a lot of bushland near the city. Sydney is a very green city. Okay, if you haven't been here, there's a very small central business district. I want to say 10% of Manhattan, if that, and then the surrounding suburbs have a lot of even native bushland, still some parklands, and then there's the beaches, of course, which are like literally a 10 minute drive from the city, depending which beach you're going to, and then it's quite green, even near the city. So there's a lot of potentially dry bushland right near the city. So having fireworks might not be the best idea. But yeah, there's a heat wave, like I said, it's coming through. And it'll peak on Tuesday. It'll be super hot, which is of course New Year's Eve. It's bad. It's bad. When there's smoke in Sydney, it's not so bad anymore. It's still there though. You can see the sun. We get some spectacular sunsets and sunrises. All the hues of orange and red you'd ever want to see in the apocalypse. It's all there. All the colors of hell, really, if you think about it. But yeah, it's interesting. What else has happened? And not a lot. It seems that in US, in the United States, this was a bad year for mass killings. 41 mass killings claimed 221 lives, and apparently it's one of the highest number of mass killings on record in the United States. But you have to put it in perspective, right? The United States has got 300 million people. Europe has got 300 million people. So you can't compare the United States to Germany or France. You got to compare the United States to Europe. And you certainly don't compare the United States to Australia. We've got some 27 million, I think, people. You've got 300 million. So a comparison is really not appropriate. And our population spread, our demographics are completely different to America. Our history is completely different. We don't have centers of poverty like they exist in America. We don't have ghettos or large project type housing complexes. We have them, but they are principally different from the ones you experience in America. Okay, it's a very different culture. We've got people here who want to be African American, right? It's like a subculture, a gangland subculture where people believe in their head they're African American and they have the right to be this gangster, right? and wear the caps and be involved in illegal activities.
Can I go hold my gun on the side?
Yeah, sure you can. Hey, Mr. Dungar, I saw you jump in there. How you doing, my friend?
Yeah, pretty good.
Excellent. Sorry. So the essential thing is to understand that there's usually a couple of ethnic groups involved in Australia that believe they should be gangsters. They lack the history that the gangs in America have. They lack the history in understanding the social problems that America has, that we don't have. Social, economic, there's a variety of issues that you have when you've got a country of 300 million people, okay? And we just don't have those issues here in Australia. We are completely mismanaged. It's a completely mismanaged economy in Australia. That's for sure. We should all be rich. In Australia, every single citizen should be rich. Why do you say that? Well, the wealth of resources that we have, the natural resources that we have here in Australia is phenomenal, right? I think we've got the second largest uranium deposits. We've got coal, iron, we've got gas, we got rare earth, we got nickel, we got copper, we got you name it, we got it.
Aluminium, which is bauxite.
Yeah, and literally, we give it away. We give it away. Like the profits leave Australia. The companies that dig them up aren't even taxed properly. There's no real royalties being paid to the Australians like you would see in other nations. It's almost like hey, we're signing Australia. Well, you take what? It's a fire sale, Dave. No pun intended here. It's a fire sale.
That's funny.
Everything must go. Everything it is, right? So it's shocking how mismanaged it is.
It is quite. Did you hear just this week, Mickey, that they're planning on selling the state forests?
Yeah, I did actually. I did. Because
there's plenty of money in the state forest, isn't there?
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're selling the people who disappear for organ harvesting. I don't know. You couldn't possibly buy the state forest unless you were a developer, and you developed half of it. You can make a lot of money that way.
You make a bucket load of money, and that's what it's about.
I just can't see that it's possible. And actually, when you look at the maps of what's currently burnt, it is all of the state forests.
Mm-hmm.
So could you imagine? Yeah. Could you imagine if there was a conspiracy here? I'm not saying there is, but could you imagine if there was one?
Well, Dave, let's
burn it all, sell it, so people can develop it, and because all the animals are dead, there's no one to complain.
Yeah, let's look at this for a second. Let's not dismiss it out of hand. Okay, so I've seen much worse things being perpetrated on the world. Is it entirely impossible to say, yes, this is a conspiracy to make large and vast tracts of land available for development? Because you're right, there's no longer an ecological argument. It's all burned to cinders. And the thing is this. Not just burned once. Some areas the fire came through 2 or 3 times.
That's right.
We have driven the koala, and I've seen koalas up close. It's probably the most placid animal you ever come across. We have driven the koala to functional extinction. Now, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. It's a very specific and defined term. If 80% of a species habitat is destroyed, it becomes functionally extinct. Now. They're not extinct yet, but they're going to have a hard time surviving in the wild, and they only eat eucalyptus leaves.
And a specific eucalyptus leaf.
Correct. Now, it's an extreme specialization, which is not found very often in the world, in our life, in our ecosystem. Scientists believe that, obviously, at some point in the past, the koala diet was a lot more varied. But then over time, as other food sources become scarce, the only thing that seems to have survived and give them sustenance was eucalyptus. Mm-hmm. And so they became specialized. Now, this was probably a process that took tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years to play out in nature, and now we're seeing this reversal of the process play out in a couple of decades, which of course the koalas can't really cope with. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So if we have destroyed the wildlife, if we have destroyed the forest, a lot of the native Australian plants need fire to propagate. It's just a part of the process. But the problem, of course, here is that these fires are unprecedented. We've never had fires this big. Full stop. Mm-hmm. Full stop. In fact, nobody has had fires this big. Full stop. No. In the world. The Amazon fires, the California fires, they're all smaller than the fires that are burning today. Okay? Mm-hmm. And they were catastrophic. People are going up in arms. Catastrophic. Oh, Amazon is burning. Australia is burning at a much greater rate. Right? And Dave, since you threw it out there, I think it is very much in the playbook of the capitalists. The die in the wool. I'm talking about the Wolf of Wall Street type capitalists, right?
Yeah,
The nation records. To do this, why not? They went around wrecking nations. That's what they did. There's a stock and trade, my friend. Stock and trade. It's what they do. It's their thing. It's their thing, man. It's my bag, yo.
Listen to you from the hood, huh? Yeah,
I know. It's nuts. But tell me about how's that? Yeah, go
on. So I drove. I'm on holidays, okay, everyone. I do this annually. And I'm on holidays. I'm up in lovely, beautiful downtown Byron Bay, if you know where that is on the coast. It's nice. It's the most easterly, sticky-outy point there is on the Australian coastline.
Like to work less, you bastard.
Work less. So what's funny is driving up here, I got to pass through a number of the zones that have been burnt.
Yeah.
And I noticed the first thing that was striking was when you're at the perimeter and all the leaves are brown. Beautiful song, but it wasn't because it's autumn. These are, they're deciduous, but they're evergreen deciduous, if that makes any sense to anybody. They perpetually put out new leaves, and it normally, they don't go brown and die. They just, they just go on like the bark on the tree is perpetually being shed. Anyway, so coming across the perimeter of the fires, and the leaves are dead brown, dead on the trees. And then you go through the thick of it, and all of the leaves are gone from the trees, and they're all on the ground. They're all on the ground, and this is what can burn again. So Mackie's completely right. You can have a fire that completely burns everything, then all the leaves fall down and can go and burn again. So yeah, it was an eye opener to drive for hundreds of kilometers through burnt forest. It's really something. All the signposting is burnt. All the road signs, and this is on freeway, right? So this is on both sides of the freeway, and seeing some of that footage, which I'm sure the entire world has seen, where the flames are leaping the same height as the trees. So the trees
70 feet. 70 feet.
Yeah, so that if it's a 100-foot tall tree, it's another 70 feet again. Yeah. On top of that is the flames, and you watch them burn. Did you watch the fire burn up the 200 meter? Yeah, right.
There was a fire crawling up a steep mountainside. Incredible.
And it's just sandstone. There was nothing to burn. But it's burning up the smoke.
Yeah.
Wow. 200-meter drop, right? Vertical drop. And it's burning up the smoke.
You think you're safe, right? No, you're not safe.
Yeah, so the fire was stopped about 15 k's from my house. And that bush remains unburnt. And we're coming up this week, yet again, another 40-plus day. And
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah, it's 40. It's even 40 degrees up here where I am.
Yeah,
and I'm 800 kilometers away.
That's going to be a worry for the firefighters, mate. That's going to be a worry.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not sure if it more gets out of control. It may be challenging for a lot of people, and there's still argument all over the place about these poor volunteers. This is the 10th week coming, who are volunteers who aren't getting paid.
No, that's changed.
I know. I saw that. They're saying we can give you $6,000 up to $6,000.
Correct.
So look, that's something. It should have always been a thing.
Oh yeah.
There should have never been debate.
Absolutely.
That's where I take that. So call the army in. They've got fire vehicles. What about the air force?
Yeah,
they can fit out. Hercules.
The problem is training, Dave. The problem is training. Neither the army nor the air force is trained in firefighting.
I've heard that, but I've also heard that the army does have fire units.
They do, yes.
And so not the whole army, surely. Not the pen pushes at Capitol Hill. I'm just saying
they should go first into the fire.
They should be first. That's right. Put the politicians in the front line, and then you'll see what happens. It'll all change. You'll have endless rounds of aerial assets coming in. But anyway, look. Apart from all of that, I just think responsibility is lost. I don't understand how the government can live with itself having all of these debates and public debates about it. It should have just been a thing. Should have been sorted. Shouldn't have been a problem because it just adds to stress. And no one at this time of year needs any more stress.
Since I've got you, before we get off the topic I discussed earlier, I think it's before you joined, whether or not there's a discussion of whether or not Sydney should have the fireworks this year or not.
Yeah, I saw that. Now, in the harbour, around the harbour, it's extremely unlikely that anything could catch fire as a result. I think the biggest worry is just the outlandish amount of money spent. But I think even cancelling it at this stage, I mean, they're already paid.
The nearest bushland is about 2 kilometers from the CBD. It's down near Cambrai. So yeah. And we've seen 30-kilometer fire sparks, right? So I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm not educated in this, but I think if people are complaining about the money for the fireworks and not the actual fireworks and fire hazard, then the money's spent already. Forget it. If it's a fire hazard, have some appliances on hand. Yeah. Have some people ready, and don't cancel it, because the amount of money that's spent is 1% of the money they'll earn. That gets changed hands, that becomes GST revenue, which becomes government revenue. And the more things you turn off and cancel, and it's like I suppose I'm likening this to sort of the terror side of life. Just get on with life. Mm. Yeah. No, but I can say that comfortably because I've been 8 weeks with fire threat to my house, and now it's, I think we're all becoming a little blasé to it. I would like to honour and respect those people who have lost their lives fighting the fire. I'd honour and respect to those people who have lost their houses, some 600 now or something, right, or greater. I think we need to, assess and use the experts to assess whether we should really run the fireworks or not. I can't make a call on it. I'd like to see the fireworks go ahead, I see that they're stopping the trams, the brand new trams in the city, because revellers might be too inebriated to get out of the way.
Well, there's that.
That's also a big issue, I think we're going to have to learn to live with the trams being in place and just drive slower, or, I don't know, do something. I don't know, right? So,
just say no. Just say no.
Just say no. That's right.
There's one other thing. We've got a few more moments to relate to you. This weekend, I should say a couple of days ago, I went to Manly Beach, Shelley's Beach. There's a little parking area which I was completely not able to get park in, so I tried to park in the street. Wasn't successful there until I found a tiny little spot, until I was told that I couldn't park there because the person that lived there couldn't get out. And I thought, oh, fair enough, it's okay, so I'll just park somewhere further. Then the owner of the house calls me and comes to my car. No, come on up. So it's like an up driveway. There was a little wedge of grass, and he asked me to just park there. This complete stranger saw me drive my car. Sorry?
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'm saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so he told me, come drive up. And so this is a house that overlooks Manly, right? This is $1 million house. Mm-hmm. And he said, just park here. Just go ahead and enjoy the day. I said, oh, my, this is brilliant. Unbelievable. I mean, this is a complete, he didn't have to do that at all. I mean, I'm no one to him, right? And I was overwhelmed. Greg Bennett, I understand his name is. I learned in a completely unrelated story, which is also interesting, but I won't bore you with. But if you're listening, which I doubt, but you might be, Greg, I really want to explain to you how much you made my life much easier that day. My daughters were already down on the beach, and I would have probably had to walk like a 45-minute track to get back to the beach after I parked. You made it a lot easier, a lot more enjoyable, and your kindness is not forgotten. So thank you so much. And just I want to share that with you because in all the grimness and all the things that are going wrong, there are people that are willing to do something else for their fellow human beings. Which they didn't have to.
I've got one story that was that, and I don't know if you mentioned it. It was about the bank robber. Did you hear about that?
No, go ahead. Oh, yes, I didn't mention it, but go ahead, yeah.
Oh, okay. So the guy robs a bank and walks outside and throws the money in the air saying Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
He didn't do it for him. He didn't do it for himself. He did it for everybody. He's like the Robin Hood, but just of randomness. My goodness me. This is how you can't write this, right?
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
That's the way the world has turned and twisted and changed from what it used to be to now. You could not write this because people wouldn't believe you.
Yes. No, exactly. No one believes that. It's too far-fetched. Right.
That's right. I saw a T-shirt yesterday. I've got 1 minute. A T-shirt yesterday. Which was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Have you seen the movie about the Beatles, where there's only one guy that remembers the Beatles?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday, that's right. And he says, these album titles, gee, it's a bit wordy.
I know, right?
So there's a T-shirt with it on it, and all I could think to myself is, it's a bit wordy.
Yeah.
I think you've got to take the time to smell the roses, know what life's all about. You really have to take your time out from all those things you think about, and enjoy what we have.
I completely agree.
That's my lesson from Christmas.
No, and then look, I completely agree. This is Listener Fun on the Radio, though, so please donate if you can. We're going to a break very shortly. Take the time to go to the website, maybe subscribe to the archives if you can, and if you want to keep the station going, couple bucks help, if there's 10,000 of you, that's a lot of money. Right?
That's right.
So yeah, but don't go away. We will talk about the hypothesis. Today we're going to talk about how real is our reality anyway. Hello and welcome back to Shiny Set Out with Dave and Mackie. Dave.
Yeah.
There he is. Beautiful. Okay, now let's get right into it again. Listener Fun on Radio. Please donate if you can. Every penny helps. 1 million people giving you a penny, you can buy a house. It's all good. Well, wow. Not in Sydney, you can't.
Not in that. No, you couldn't.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are places in the world where you could. Was there anything else you wanted to cover off, my friend? Before
No, I'm perfectly okay. Except for I'd love a copy of the show notes.
I can do that.
I can tell everyone this is show number 405.
Correct. It should be coming your way.
And Becky and I suggest that you take the time to click on the links on the website, subscribe to the archives, and you can also purchase things from the website, like 16,500 seeds or an MP proof. What's it called again?
Thumb drive.
You can get a thumb drive, an EMP proof thumb drive that has survival documents on it as well. Very important for getting back the things that you knew you had. Oh boy, I miss.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, me too.
Don't we all?
3 months, if you can believe it.
Oh, I can't.
No,
You know.
I know. But anyway, look, yeah, he
Have
made
you
me
hit the
back.
send button?
Yes, I have, my friend.
Mm.
You haven't got it yet?
No.
Well,
But that's
it's-
all right.
How about now?
No, that's better.
Just refreshed something. All works. Now, we are on page number 33 of 69, okay? And last week, we left off talking about what it is we have to do. And the answer is love. We have to love everybody. Cruelty and greed, ignorance have made this prison hell. We're in prison, yes, but it doesn't have to be hell, right? Now, escape from this prison must not be the only answer. It seems we can turn this place into paradise as well, right? And paradise, of course, in the sense of home. This place can become our home. Okay, now we do not know why we're here. Epiphany notwithstanding, the ultimate reason still eludes me. Suffice it to say, the Epiphany will go a long way toward explaining why it is we're being kept here. But then the ultimate reason is still, as I said, elusive. But how real, Dave, is our reality anyway, right? Holographic states, sim city, quantum weirdness, and objective reality, if there really is such a thing. Food for thought. The holographic principle. The holographic principle was first postulated over 20 years ago as a possible solution to Stephen Hawking's famous information paradox. The paradox is essentially that black holes appear to swallow information, which, according to quantum theory, is impossible. But while the principle was never mathematically formalized for black holes, theoretical physicist Juan Maldacena demonstrated several years later that holography did indeed hold for a theoretical type of space called anti-de Sitter space. Unlike the space in our universe, which is relatively flat on cosmic scales, so flat earthers, there you go, it's flat, told you it's flat. Anti-de Sitter space, as described by mathematicians, curves inward like a saddle. If this depiction of space is correct, then like any computer, there's an inherent limit to the universe's data storage and processing capacity. Yeah? Anti-de Sitter space is not directly relevant to our universe, but it allows us to perform calculations that would otherwise be very difficult, if not impossible, says Gru Miller. Within this theoretical space, Maldacena showed that two sets of physical equations mapped perfectly onto each other. The equations of gravitational theory and those of quantum field theory. This correspondence was totally unexpected, because while gravity is described in 3 spatial dimensions, quantum field theory requires only 2. That the laws of physics produced identical results 2 or 3 dimensions, 2 dimensions pointed to anti-de Sitter space as space's holographic nature. This was the first instance where somebody explicitly showed how holography works, Gru Miller said. But given that our universe is not anti-de Sitter space, it's approximately flat at large scales. It's interesting to ask whether the holographic principle applies to flat space as well. To demonstrate that our universe can indeed be seen as a hologram, physical quantities would have to be calculated using both quantum field theory and gravitational theory in flat space, and the results would have to match. Gru Miller decided to see whether one key feature of quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, could be replicated using gravitational theory. When 2 quantum particles are entangled, they cannot be described individually, but instead form a single quantum object, even if they are far apart. There is a measure that describes how entangled a quantum system is, known as the entropy of entanglement. After several years of work, Gru Miller and his colleagues managed to show that this entropy takes on exactly the same value when calculated in gravitational theory and quantum field theory for spaces like our universe. Takes on exactly the same value. Exactly. This calculation affirms our assumption that the holographic principle can also be realized in flat spaces, said Riegler in a press release. It is evidence for the validity of this correspondence in our universe. If the holographic principle does indeed describe our universe, It could help resolve many inconsistencies between relativistic physics and quantum physics, including the black hole information paradox. It would also offer researchers a way to solve some very tough quantum problems using relatively simple gravitational equations. But before we can be sure that we're living in the matrix, there's still a lot of work to be done. Dave?
We did this calculation, this is a quote, using 3D gravitational theory and 2D quantum field theory, but the universe actually has 3 spatial dimensions plus time, Grumler said. A next step is to generalize these considerations to include one higher dimension. There are also many other quantities that should correspond between gravitational theory and quantum field theory, and examining these correspondences is ongoing work. Beyond the theoretical considerations, there are entirely different matter. There's the entirely different matter of pulling back the illusion and experimentally observing the holographic nature of reality. As it happens, physicists at the Department of Energy's Fermilab are now trying to do just that. As Motherboard reported last year, Fermilab Center for Particle Astrophysics Director Craig Hogan recently hypothesized that our macroscopic world is like a 4-dimensional video display, created from pixel-like bits and of subatomic information 10 trillion times smaller than atoms. To our macroscopic eye, everything around us appears 3-dimensional. But just as moving your face towards the TV screen will cause pixel to come into focus, if we stare deeply enough into matter on a subatomic level, the bitmap of our holographic universe might reveal itself. So, if this depiction of space is correct, then like any computer, there is an inherent limit to the universe's data storage and processing capacity. What's more, that limit should bear telltale signatures, so-called holographic noise, that we can measure. As Hogan explained to Motherboard's Jason Kohler, if we are indeed living in a hologram, the basic effect that is that reality has a limited amount of information, like a Netflix movie when Comcast is not giving you enough bandwidth. So things are a little blurry and jittery. They're called artifacts, by the way, everyone. Nothing ever just stands still, but is always moving a tiny bit. Reality's bandwidth fuzz, if you will, is exactly what Hogan's lab is now trying to measure, using an instrument called a holometer, which is basically a really big and powerful laser pointer. We are specifically trying to determine if there is a limit to the precision in which we can measure the relative positions of large objects. Postdoctoral researcher Robert Lanza told the author in an email, this would represent a fundamental limit in the actual information that the universe stores. The actual experiment that will decipher this involves measuring the relative positions of large mirrors separated by 40 meters using Michelson laser interferometers with a precision 1 billion times smaller than an atom. If, as according to the holographic noise hypothesis, information about the positions of 2 mirrors is finite, the opposite, complete opposite, then the researchers should ultimately hit a limit in their ability to resolve their respective positions. What happens then? Lanza said. We expect to simply measure noise, as if the positions of the objects were dancing around, not able to be pinned down with more precision. So in the end, the experimental signature we are looking for is an irreducible noise floor to the universe not actually storing more about the positions of the mirrors. The team is currently collecting and analysing data and expects to have their first results by the end of the year. I'm not sure which year that is. Lanza told the author they are encouraged by the fact that their instruments have achieved by far the best sensitivity ever to gravitational waves at higher frequencies. The physics of gravitational waves is unrelated to holographic noise. However, the gravity wave results demonstrate that our instrument is operating at top-notch science quality. That sounds like a science term to me. You could have said calibration, but that's fine. And we are now poised to experimentally dig into the science of holographic noise, Lanza said. So it seems that for now, we will have to wait for the physicists doing the hard math and shooting the lasers to tell us whether our lives are just a very sophisticated illusion. In the meanwhile, the big question on my mind, says the author, how the heck will such a revolution affect us? Well, this knowledge won't impact our everyday lives in the same way that knowing about the Big Bang or other galaxies does not change our everyday lives, Groomler said. But Meki, I'm sure, has a comment at the end. But in the same way that knowing that the universe started with a Big Bang profoundly changed our view of the universe, knowing that the universe is like a big hologram is a profound insight. Lanza agrees it would force us to fundamentally alter our perception of reality in a way that many of us, myself included, says the author, would have a hard time wrapping our heads around, he said. Indeed, it sort of untethers the definition of simulation entirely. If we are living in a giant hologram, can we really say that all the sim worlds on MMOs we've built aren't as real as our universe, as planets, star clusters and galaxies, all of which boil down to quantum dots in a cosmic bitmap? Meki, Groom,
yeah, look,
I don't
yeah,
share Groom's optimism, right? It's the same as discovering we're in the Matrix.
Of course it is. If we found out we live in a hologram, everything that we ever held dear to us, maybe except for the adherence of the hypothesis, would collapse. Everything would collapse. And
would people still go to work?
Look, you would, you could, but why? The question is why? What's the point, right? Mm-hmm. And really, if you internalize the hypothesis and you understand this, and even if you're an adherent to Buddhism or Hinduism, you're going to be okay, because you never believed that any of this was real anyway. If you're a Gnostic, you're going to be okay because you never believed any of this was real. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is the gross matter, not the subtle matter they're talking about. So if you've got a certain, but the vast majority of us, because we've been lied to and we've been brought up into the lie, would be either we ignore it, placebo effect, right, or we deal with it, and if we deal with it, then it'll collapse your belief system because it doesn't make sense anymore. It's completely irrelevant, everything that you believe, if you're living in simulation. You know what I mean? So it's a fundamental question of existence here. That right?
So Meki, just using that MMO example, that the Sims in SimCity 4, that my kids play, where you build a 1,000-mile long hallway and they die on their way to sleep or a bathroom. If they had the ability to measure the environment they were in and to discover, it's the same question, discover that in fact that they were living in a simulation.
Yeah.
That's how we are, right? Is it possible, I wonder, to discover that you're in a simulation if you're in it? I think we're scratching at the surface. Yeah. I think the quantum world doesn't make any sense whatsoever when it should.
No.
And as we know in the hypothesis, everything that we know everything that we are, everything we expect, is what it breaks down to.
Yeah.
So if you and I were if you, Mackie, were the only person left in the entire quantum world, I wonder what it would look like.
Probably comfortable for you and me. Right? I want to say comfortable.
I want to be famous.
I want to be famous. But just to let everybody know as well, I've been trying to follow up this article and subsequent releases. Now, the article for everybody, the article is from 2015, and I can't find any later publications in English or German.
What have they been doing for 4 years, I wonder?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I honestly don't know. So I'm gonna do some more extensive searches just to let you know. But right now I have no update on the experiment at all. So we'll see what we can find. There's a homepage for Mr. Grumila.
Wow, old school.
I know. All right. That's not it though. It's Austrian. He's Austrian. Anyway, I'll update everybody if I find out more of this experiment, because this experiment obviously is important, to put it mildly. I want to see where we're at. No, all of his stuff is 2015, 2016.
Wow.
Ooh, Dave, what have we found here?
Hashtag bodies.
There's nothing here from Daniel Grumela after 2016.
Maybe he exited the Matrix.
Hang on, there's a workshop, 2019. I'm gonna check it.
Cool.
Let me check it. Let me look. Stay with me, but there's nothing published that I can see here, even on YouTube. Right? This one is 2016. But we've compiled here for our esteemed listenership a number of points that would point, so pardon the double Dutch, to the fact that our reality may in fact be digital, right? Notwithstanding all the things we just discussed. And there's a whole bunch of them. We're going to take them in turn to share them with you. Some are longer, some are shorter. The first one is a breakdown of infinite resolution in physics. Infinite resolution causes all sorts of breakdowns of known laws of physics, including matter imploding into black holes at sub-Planck scales, and the inability to reconcile general relativity with quantum mechanics. Currently favored theories of matter and energy, string theory that is, and solutions to gravity and quantum mechanics, which is the loop quantum gravity, assume a minimal length scale. Assume. Okay, we don't know, but they assume it. Furthermore, evidence supports the notion that quantum states are digital, in that spin values are quantized and there are no intermediate states, which is anomalous in a continuous space-time. So in a continuous space-time, it's smooth. The best way to explain it is, if you're listening to a record, you're listening to the true sound, because the sound was etched into a meter, right? It made waves, and you're listening to it, right? You're listening, exactly. You're listening to it. Whereas if you're listening to a CD, the sound was digitized, which means it was broken down into zeros and ones, right?
And sampled at a regular interval.
Correct. And you never get the same quality of sound with the CD that you get with a really good record and a really good record player. You can't. Impossible. It is simply impossible, right? And this is what we're looking at here, right? Now, as renowned physicist John Wheeler concluded, every physical quantity, every it, derives its ultimate significance from bits, binary yes or no indications. So in a smooth universe, there should be no final anything. There should be no final unit of anything, right? Now, again, we've talked about the Planck length at length, and the assumption here that nothing is bigger than a Planck length, right? That's the minimal length scale.
That's right. Yeah, we spoke about the Planck length at length.
We did. I know, it's double Dutch again, but we did. And you know, right? It's the show of I don't know what you call this. Puns. unintended literary puns. But it shouldn't. It should be infinitely regressible. Right? There should be no end to it. There should be no end to reality, as it were. If there is, then it would be a very strong indication that this is not a natural universe. Dave?
Yeah, completely. The next point, evidence that our reality is digital, is point 2, breakdown of infinite resolution in information systems. It takes an infinite amount of resources to create a continuous reality, but a finite amount to create a quantized reality. The very nature of this computational mechanisms of a computer are essentially the same as quantum mechanics, a sequence of states which nothing exists or happening between the states. The resolution of any program is analogous to the spatial resolution of our reality, just at a different level. In fact, carrying Moore's law, consistent over the past 40 years, for that matter, forward, computers will reach the Planck resolution of 2192. However, it is...
In 2192.
In 2192. However, it is not necessary to model reality all the way to that level for the model to be indistinguishable from our reality. Only the observed elements of our reality need to be modeled, and then only down to a resolution that makes the observable limitations of our measurements devices. So only to that we can actually measure. A program can do this dynamically. Therefore, given Moore's law and the limitations of observational reality, we should be able to create virtual realities that are indistinguishable from our current reality within 20 years or so. The very fact that our reality appears to be quantized may be considered strong evidence that reality is programmed. Meki, I'm just going to point here. Oh, we've got a green tree frog on the window.
Nice.
That's awesome. For a neon light to emit a combination of 2 separate frequencies only when electrified, and the path the atom must take from one shell to another within that element, within the gas, say helium, to produce a combination of 2 different frequencies, means that the atom, the electron flying around the nucleus has to change its position from one shell to another instantaneously, from one closer to the nucleus and one farther from, because that's how you make 2 separate frequencies from the same gas, from the same atom. This flies in the face of conventional physics and is one of those things that's measurable in our observable universe, where it's impossible for it to do it, but yet it does it. Meki, what's number 3?
Before we go on, I just want to point out that, and thank you for sharing that, it is just one of those things. Look, I think we should be honest with ourselves and admit quite freely that we have no idea. We just don't know. Like, I mean, I'm the first one to put my hand up. Don't know. Learn as much as you can, but be open to new information, right? That's what I say. Don't be dogmatic. Don't stand on something that you can't possibly defend. I don't care what you believe at this point in life. I don't care what you think you know. I challenge you. I will say right now that it's impossible for you to defend it to the absolute end, because you don't know. I don't know. None of us know, and it makes me angry to see people argue over these things. There was a recent flame war in one of my posts. I just
you have them too, right?
Oh yeah. No, I didn't have it. It was 2 people commenting on each other.
Right, against each other. That's great.
Yeah. It was like 180 comments back and forth. And I go,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. Like I posted something. I can't remember what I posted. It was completely inane, right? So I posted it. And then whoosh. And I said to them in the end, you're all right. Because if this is a multiverse, there's no single truth. So good luck to you. So you're all correct.
180 posts later. That's hilarious.
But yeah, look, I mean, they're both friends, so that wasn't, it wasn't quite as venomous as I make it out. But it was just interesting to see just how engaged people still get with this stuff, which is great. It's great, right? Passion is good. Sorry, number 3, Dave, the simulation argument. Various modern philosophers and scientists have posited that we are likely to be living in a simulation. Nick Bostrom was one of them. This is because it is highly probable that we will be able to create ancestor simulations within a few years. Like Dave just said, about 20 years or so, we can create one that's indistinguishable from ours. When we achieve the transhuman stage, right? So we can create those when we achieve transhuman stage, due either to the number of simulations that will be run or to the proximity that we are to that stage, it is actually more probable that we are in one than the case that where we haven't yet reached that stage. So to simplify it very quickly, what is really important is to understand that it's more likely that we are in a simulation, mathematically, statistically speaking, than not. It is more likely we are in a simulation from a statistical point of view, right? That's really what he's saying here. Over to you, my dear friend.
Well, thank you very much. The only reason that this is being hypothesized is because we've created simulated environments. If we hadn't ever made one yet, because it would be inevitable, then we wouldn't have the idea. We couldn't connect them together. We would have just gone along blissfully unaware that we could ever be in we wouldn't know what a simulation was. But now that the simulations are becoming so realistic and, graphics is coming better, and like I've stated once in the past, Mickey, this is absolutely true, that a computer doesn't render the entire scene. It only renders that is required to render because of viewpoints. So if it doesn't need to be seen, it's not rendered until it needs to be seen. Does it make sense? I hope it makes sense. That is trying to reduce the unnecessary load on the simulation. And therefore, the double slit experiment, it does exactly what we think it shouldn't do until we watch it, and then it does what we want it to do. Therefore, we get to see it being rendered in the way we want it to be rendered when we watch it. I hope that makes sense. Matter as data, or not data, matter as data. It was once thought that 0% of matter was empty space. None. There was no empty space. In the early 20th century, scientists discovered that atoms are actually comprised of subatomic particles. If these subatomic particles, such as neutrons, were made of solid mass, like little billiard balls, then 99 point, and there's considerably a large amount of nines here, and some like 15 nines after the point, percent of normal matter would still be empty space. So looking at an atom, if it was like a basketball and I gave Meki a billiard ball, he would have to stand something like 20 miles away from me. And all of that gap inside there is that 99.9 repeater percent of empty space. This, of course, unless those particles themselves are not really solid matter in the first place, in which case even more of space is truly empty. This was shown to be the case in the 1960s via QCD, or quark theory. Now, string theorists say that even quarks are really just vibrating bits of string, possibly with a width of the Planck length. If so, that would make subatomic particles all but 1e to the 38th empty space. I mean, that's some crazy amount of empty space. Hence, normal matter is all but 1 to the 52nd empty space. It gets kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? In fact, if particles are comprised of strings, why do we even need the idea that there is something material? Isn't it enough to define the different types of matter by the single number, the frequency at which the strings vibrate? What is matter anyway? If it is a number assigned to a type of object that has to do with how that object behaves in a gravitational field. In other words, it is just a rule. We don't really experience matter. What we experience is electromagnetic radiation influenced by some object that we call matter visually. And the effect of the electromagnetic force due to the repulsion of charges between the electron shells of the atoms in our fingers when the electron shells of the atoms in the object, and it's tactile when we touch it. In other words, rules. In any case, if you extrapolate our scientific progress, it's easy to see that the ratio of stuff to space is trending towards zero, which means what? That matter is most likely just data. And the forces that cause us to experience matter the way we do are just rules about how data interacts with itself. For example, probability wave functions follow patterns described accurately by relatively simple mathematical equations that resemble probability functions that apply to data and rules. That's all there needs to be. By Occam's razor, this is a simpler and more likely way to describe matter and only requires pure data. Like in a video game, you can't go through a wall because they've got clipping turned on. So you can't go through a wall. Otherwise, you'd just be able to pass straight through the wall. That's just a rule. That's all it is.
But the thing is this, you should be able to walk straight through that wall because it's mostly empty space. Really, that's all it is. So I believe that a lot of the magic that we heard about, yes, so how can I put this best? Let me just try to phrase this right for everybody. We talk a lot about the supernatural. The supernatural, in my opinion, is just stuff we haven't understood yet. And we might never understand. We might be able to use it one day, but in our present incarnation, we're somewhat limited and we might never be able to understand it. So matter, as we have just learned, is almost non-existent, right? If you were a betting man or woman, and then you were giving the chance to bet on a fight of matter versus empty space, you probably put your money on empty space because there's a lot more of it, right? It's just it's incredibly a lot more of it. And it also then, I'm just drawing the bow here to thought and consciousness. Because ultimately, thought and consciousness is only information. It's data, right? But it seems to be able to shape our reality. And we've had many experiments conducted that we've seen where, and clearly one of the most famous one, obviously, is the double slit experiment, where the observational fact seems to directly influence how matter reacts, right? An electron will react a certain way, whether it's looked at or it's not looked at, to really dumb it down a lot and simplify it. It is the observational fact. So yes, ultimately, I want to say that data probably underlies reality, but I think, and again, this comes to the epiphany, it needs something to observe itself.
Yeah,
it needs something. It needs to be observed. It needs to be seen. It's almost like the Vikings used to say, "Come and witness me." Right? If it wasn't seen, it didn't happen. And I think that's probably one of the building blocks of reality. And the more people see it, and the more people agree, the more reality is shaped in that fashion. So the more people agree on something, the more likely it is for that reality to be a reality. I read this fascinating science fiction story many years ago about an ontologist. An ontologist is a person that concerns themselves with the science of being, right, existing. And there was an experiment done, and essentially the experiment said, They created a perfect 45-degree surface, and at that point they shot the light beam at it, and the electron slowed down just long enough to decide which way to go in order for reality to completely collapse. And then you enter the ontological space, which was fascinating because clearly the person that wrote that particular story was Christian, because it was Adam and Eve, and the fellow scientist was the snake in the Garden of Eden. So it was interesting. But my point here is
okay.
yeah.
No, go ahead. Finish your point.
Yeah, the point is that we need to understand that we are critical in the creation of our realities. Yeah, critical. Our intentional thought, directed thought, manifested thought, like when we take action. That's very, very important for our reality to exist. And the Epiphany, we'll talk about this somewhat.
Becky, I have an example here which will just blow your mind. Are you ready? Could you imagine in a CRT television set, instead of having a single slit that the electron was fired through, then magnetically steered towards each pixel on the screen, whether it be RGB, red, green, or blue? They had that's the accuracy at which they could aim these electrons. Could you imagine what it would have been like should we have thrown the electron through a double slit rather than a single slit, and what reality we would have seen on that television set?
I like that. I wonder if we could set that up.
It could have been anything visual that we ever wanted to see.
Well, yeah.
How good is that?
I like it. I like it. Okay, here's your little. This is your weekend assignment. Just build me one of those things. Go into your workshop and use your torches. Wow. Now, in fact, we are coming to that very thing, my friend. The computational analog and the observer effect. Of course, one does not need to model reality all the way to the Planck level for the model to be indistinguishable from our reality. An efficient program would dynamically generate incremental resolutions of various components as needed, such as when an object is put under a microscope. Like Dave said this before, in a video game, you only render your immediate surroundings, right? Like the rest doesn't exist. It exists as a potential that can be rendered, but as Dave moves through the video game, he only sees or he only experiences what is in his immediate vicinity, right? So this is what this means. Extending this concept to the quantum level, once the subatomic particle is observed, the program must then establish properties for that particle, effectively resulting in the collapse of the probability wave function. Bow, wow, wow, wow. In 2008, the Institute for Quantum Optics and Quantum Information, the IQOQI in Vienna.
They stayed up all night making that up.
I bet they did. It was a slow day at the office. In Vienna, determined to a certainty of 80 orders of magnitude. 80 orders of magnitude that objective reality does not exist by itself and only comes into being when consciously observed. This is part of the Epiphany here, guys, by the way. Thus, the uncertainty of this result is 1 in 1 gazillion. That's like this 1 with 50 zeros behind it, okay?
That's right.
Which is clearly a ridiculously small number. This effectively put a nail in the coffin of the last hope for objective realists. The hidden variable theory. Interestingly, though, we can establish a very real explanation for this effect by turning the evidence question on its head. Thus, if you were to program a universe simulation, what kinds of programmatic efficiencies would be needed? Most important would be to employ dynamic reality generation. I want to spend a couple of seconds on this. It was in Diablo 2 that for the first time dynamic lighting was available in a gaming environment. Right? All other games before Diablo 2 had everything pre-programmed. So you go a certain path and the light would go that way and there would be no other way. In Diablo, you could walk around and you could have a torch and the light would be dynamically created, casting shadows and looking into dark corners at your whim. None of this was pre-generated. It was dynamically created as you went through it. Right? It took an enormous amount of computing power. And sorry, just as a little aside, that's the reason why NVIDIA is now the leading GPU producer. Now, GPUs are like, massive fields of CPUs that are used for AI computational purposes.
Right. And now they've included, Mickey, they've included ray tracing now.
Yeah.
So they've included light and how light affects surfaces and reflective properties of light. Otherwise, the light was programmed into the scene.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
It almost looks real, almost.
No, but that's the thing.
And we're getting there, right? I know.
Deep learning, machine learning. So, but it's funny how this all happens. I mean, NVIDIA is now the prime producer of GPUs. They've teamed up with all the big, like Intel, Lenovo, Dell,
AMD.
Yeah, all of them. They're all together now. Incredible. Now, sorry, let's get back to our very interesting scientific observations. In other words, for any space unobserved by a conscious entity, there's no sense in creating the reality for that space in advance. It would unnecessarily consume too many resources. Instead, macroscopic reality may be modeled with an extremely high degree of compression, which the estimation runs at about 100 trillion. Now, this is reminiscent of the movie The 13th Floor. I don't know if you've seen this. It was made in the wake of the Matrix movies, and it was about this guy who realizes he lives in a simulation, and he realizes it because he keeps driving, but there's a roadblock, that prevents him from leaving the city, and he goes past that, and there's the road stops and keeps walking until he comes to a point where his world turns into like a computer matrix, green lines, like in Tron, right? So that's really. So it only rendered up to a certain point, and clearly it wasn't dynamic. It was pre-rendered, existed, and didn't render any further because the computer resources were completely exhausted at that point, which is very interesting. Now, once you decide to isolate a subatomic particle in that macroscopic object and observe it, the program would then have to establish a definitive position for that particle, effectively resulting in the collapse of the wave function, or decoherence. We've discussed this ad nauseum with you guys.
Yep.
Moreover, the complete behavior of the particle at that point might be forever under control of the program, like a finite state machine. After all, why delete the model once observed in the likely event that it will be observed again at some point in the future? Thus, an efficient process of zooming in on reality in the program would result in exactly the type of behavior observed by quantum physicists, fully explaining the observer effect as well as quantum entanglement. In other words, in order to be efficient resource-wise, the program decoheres only the space and matter that it needs to. And that actually makes perfect sense in a very scary way. If you're looking at it from a computer resources point of view, decoherence makes perfect sense, because if it's not observed, all right, it's in coherence, quantum coherence. Every state is there. It doesn't have to do anything. But as soon as you look at it, you have to decohere it. You have to spend resources to pinpoint a reality that you want and render it. Before that,
That's the word, render. It gets rendered when we have to look at it.
Yeah.
It collapses. That's right. That's our entire show history is resourced around the idea that to render it collapses it, and it becomes a thing that then you can go back and look at later. But without looking at it, it never needs to render it. It never needs to collapse. It's whatever it wants to be to start.
Correct. It's really mind-blowing stuff, right? And I urge everybody listening to look into these matters for themselves. I mean, it's very hard to remain aloof and arrogant about your opinion sets once you understand what we're faced with here.
Wow. It honestly, this coming from scientists, yeah? That's where this comes from. This isn't from Mekki and I. Mekki and I have arrived here from our own research. But scientists, we're in the same room talking about the same thing. And they've come here from math. They've come here from observational science. They've come here from repetitive experiments that show the same result that they still can't understand.
Yeah.
So what this next part, what creates reality? Equations creating reality. To cite one of many examples, it has been shown that the negative frequency solutions to Maxwell's equations actually reveal themselves in components of light. Were our reality what it appears to be, solutions to equations should only make sense in the context of describing reality. However, it seems to be the other way around. Data and rules don't manifest from the reality, they create the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's heavy. That's the same example that I'm giving, that, you make a virtual environment. Like I used to make Doom and Quake levels where I could make a wall where I could fall through it, or I could make a wall that was solid. I could make rules where you drop something and it fell to the ground or it just kept falling. Meki, in Minecraft, the latest, worldwide smash game that all the kids are playing, all the young kids, you can just keep going in any direction and the computer is forced to render it permanently.
Okay.
It isn't rendered if you don't look at it.
Of course. Resources, man. Resource constraints.
It is really resource constraints. And then you can build something and go back to it later.
Yeah.
Yeah? Crazy.
Yeah. It is. It is nuts. It is nuts. I think we've got time for one more, maybe two more, if I read really quickly. There are other computational similarities as well. Many researchers have also noted that a simulation model solves the prime mover philosophical problem. While the Big Bang Theory implies a universe that arises from nothing, which has no grounding in objective reality, a virtual reality can easily boot up from an external context. In Brian Whitworth's paper, The Emergence of the Physical World from Information Processing, he outlines several additional examples of circumstantial evidence that our universe is a simulation, including randomness and apparent lack of hidden variables. It never made sense to Einstein, second one, nor many other scientists, that particles would behave randomly. For example, radioactive decay, as opposed to following the deterministic rules. However, in the computation model, random number generators are a simple concept, even in today's systems, and can easily be used to drive apparently random behavior. The third one here is probability waves are easy to create. Related to the point above, the probability waves that describe all matter and are responsible for the real effect of quantum tunneling have no basis in objective reality, yet are easy to construct programmatically.
Explanatory power, the huge set of well-studied anomalies facing us in fields as varied as physics for entanglement, philosophy, near-death experiences, geology, anthropology, that's the OOP parts, metaphysics, precognition, and the psychology can all be explained only by a programmed reality model, no other theory that has explanatory capacity.
Not to do it all, the theory of everything. And then finally, we can get it in, thermodynamics and the information content of the universe. There's an uncanny similarity to Boltzmann's formula for entropy. S equals K times Ln in brackets W. And Shannon's formula for information entropy. H equals E in brackets minus Ln, brackets P, brackets X, bracket, bracket, bracket. In thermodynamics, entropy is proportional to the logarithm of the number of states that matter can be in. In information theory, entropy is proportional to the logarithm of the probability mass function of some random variable. This doesn't necessarily imply that matter is information, just that they behave similarly at a macroscopic level. So behavior of matter information at a macroscopic hour level is very similar. Okay. So this is the section that we can conclude with today. Next week, we're going to talk about quantum physics. We found an article from November 14, 2019, so very, very recent. And it states, quantum physics, our study suggests objective reality doesn't exist. November 14, 2019. Wow. Okay, and the paper was written by, I want to say, paper, blah, 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 doesn't say. I will find out who wrote it, but there's an abstract here, which we, of course, share with you, and we read the entire experiment out. Oh, here you go. Czesław Bruckner of the University of Vienna. and I've got the link here. I'll put the
2
link
minutes.
into the chat. Guys, you can do some homework and read up on it before we discuss it. Oh, that didn't work. How come I can't paste anything in the chat? Oh, there you go. There we go. Go to that link. That's what we're going to discuss next week. Really interesting stuff. Now, this is Listener Funded Radio. Please do donate if you can. This station, I think, is a great platform for crazy people like Dave and I, and a whole host of other crazy people. But where else do you get this information? Seriously, where else would you get this? Right? And we put it together, hopefully, in a way that makes sense to you guys, because that's the point, to understand it all in context, not piecemeal here and there, as though it doesn't affect your life. This absolutely affects your life. This is absolutely fundamental to your existence, right? This information. Dave, I hope you're safe up in Queensland.
Yeah, there's no fires around me. Just that we're going to suffer from some extraordinary heat, and for all those people around the world in whatever weather conditions that it may be outside of the ordinary, take it easy, take care, have plans, and keep yourself safe. And to all of the people who have just, since we last saw you, have celebrated Christmas or any other Hanukkah or a Festivus for that matter, find that peace within you. That's all I ask.
Absolutely, 100%. Couldn't say it any better, my friend. Love and peace out from me.
Yeah, man. All right. See you guys. Take care, everyone. Jer Bear has his wonderful show coming up after us, and as he always does. Take care, everyone.